Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. Today with an amazing guest, Mr. Eric Partaker. How are you, Eric?
I'm very good, Andrew. Very excited to be here, and hopefully we'll be able to share some nuggets that your listeners will find valuable.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to have you on the show, and I know that you've had a interesting few years over recent times, so I'm sure it's going to come out in the episode. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show because I know you've got some great stuff that you've covered, and I know you've shared that recently in some things that you're going to announce in a little bit. So I suppose a quick question is, what gets you up in the morning?
Yeah, what gets me up in the morning? Well, these days, okay. So to answer that, let me start off by telling you a story, because I think the story is a good segue into what gets me up in the morning these days, which is very different from what got me up in the morning, say, 10 years ago. And on that note, 10 years ago, so I'm going to take us back in time. It's November of 2010, so literally almost 10 years ago to the date.
Wow.
And I've boarded my flight back to London. And shortly after the cabin doors closed, I could sense something's not right with me. I had been feeling not at my best the whole year, prior to that point. And as the plane begins to ascend, I start to sweat, and I start feeling quite nauseous, and suddenly I have a lot of pressure in my chest, and soon that pressure becomes pain, goes down my left arm. And I say to my colleague sitting next to me, I said, "Lewis, can you please feel my arm?" Because I just wanted to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. And he takes a feel of my arm, and it's completely ice cold, like several degrees colder than the rest of my body. And I asked Lewis if he can go get some help. Something is definitely not right. The pain's intensifying, a lot of pressure in the chest. And Lewis runs, grabs the attention of a stewardess who comes to my aid, sees that I'm seriously unwell, gets on the intercom, asks if there's a doctor on board. Luckily for me, there was one. Doctor comes rushing up from the back of the plane, takes my vital signs and says, "We need to land the plane immediately. I think he's having a heart attack." And when you hear those words and you're 35,000 feet in the air, I don't know what feels more help. You'd have to be an astronaut to feel more helpless.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I thought it was game over. I thought that was it. This is all she wrote. And as the plane began to descend, I remember this terrifying feeling that my heart was going to stop just before reaching safety. And we finally touched ground. It was a small airport in France. They had shut down the runway for the emergency landing. And the emergency response team boarded the plane, took me off into the waiting ambulance where they administered nitrates to open up the arteries, increase blood flow to the heart. And as the ambulance sped off to the local hospital, I looked up into the eyes of the French paramedic looking down at me, and I said, "Please don't let me die. I have a 5-year-old son." And I probably thought, moments after, I hope he speaks English.
Yes. Yeah.
But in a moment like that, again, when you think it's game over, lights out, that's it. Whatever your truth is, whatever's really important to yourself, the truth reveals itself. Your soul speaks, your heart speaks. And think about it this way: if you had suddenly been given 5 more minutes to live, or thought you were on your deathbed and you're given 5 more minutes to live, it's not like a single one of the people listening right now, none of you would think, "Oh, thank God, can you pass me my laptop real quick so I can fire off a few more emails?"
Yeah, exactly.
You think about what was most important to you. And that was a pivotal moment for me, because the next day when I woke up in that hospital, I realized that everything needed to change. So prior to that point, I had been absolutely obsessed with achievement, but went about it in all the wrong ways. So I started off my career working 100 plus hour work weeks at McKinsey and Company. I then ran a McKinsey-sponsored nonprofit for a while as the MD. I then joined Skype in its early days, and we scaled to 500 people. We had an exit to eBay for about $4 billion. Built several of my own businesses, including a chain of restaurants in the UK called Chilango, a Mexican restaurant chain. But it was just constant work. Now, I didn't achieve, all of that, especially with my own entrepreneurial stuff. I kind of started just towards the end of that period. But that whole 10 years before that was just work at all costs with no real attention to my health or my relationships.
Right.
And after that point, I decided that was the epiphany point, because I wanted to understand, these days I help CEOs and entrepreneurs, perform at a peak level. So close the gap basically between their current and best self, and scale up not just their company, but also themselves. And I realized that I needed to understand peak performance in a more holistic way, because if we think about sports, for example, if you're looking at your favorite team out there, you don't achieve peak performance with the team by just looking at what goes on the field. You have to look at what's going on off the field as well. Athletes get this, right? It's your health and home needs to be in order.
Like a holistic approach to it.
Yeah, or else you won't be on top of your game, right? And so I went very deep into the science of habit formation, picked up several coaching certifications, including with the High Performance Institute in the US. And I started to apply all of that to myself, to my leadership teams. And as a result, I became a lot more fit and healthy, a lot more present and available as a husband and father. And it culminated professionally for me in being recognized in the UK as the CEO of the year in 2019. And now, again,
an amazing achievement. I mean, that is amazing. Congratulations.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. I mean, it was the result of a lot of highs and lows, right?
Right.
And navigating those as best as I could. I mean, I've made tons of mistakes. There's so much I would have done differently. But it's the journey that and how that journey was navigated that I think led to that recognition. And as said, so these days I apply all of that how to help a CEO or an entrepreneur or a leader, how to help them scale up, again, not just their companies or their organizations, but also themselves, their leadership, their well-being. So doing it very, very holistically.
It's interesting. Thank you for sharing that story. I mean, it's when I read the book that I know you're going to talk about in a second, the learnings I can relate to, because I think I don't know what, and I suppose it's one of the things I was asking about was about why do we think that people fall into that kind of situation where they kind of, if you mapped those three dimensions, that you mentioned about relationships and health and work, we seem to over-index on the work side. And I don't know whether it's a cultural thing or whether it's how we're brought up by our parents, but I think probably a lot of people that will listen to this episode on today's show will be saying, I can relate to that. And it's this kind of thing where you get into this groove, you get into this kind of hamster wheel of thinking that you have to over-index on the work stuff. You have to over-index on the and maybe it's the psychology thing, it's the mindset thing, it's the way you're brought up. I don't know. Have you got any thoughts about that? What's the root cause of that? Have you discovered?
I have thought about that. The root cause, and even just taking a step back as well. There's certainly a root cause, but also, and this happens invariably, when I dig deep with any high-performing leader out there, they don't just want to be high-performing leaders. if you dig deep enough, they would also like to be fit and healthy. They would also like to be a great spouse and parent, right? So everyone actually wants to be their best on three key dimensions: their health, their wealth, or, work as a wealth driver, health, wealth, and relationships. Those are the three domains that we all want to maximize. Now, why do we tend to over-index wealth or our work? I definitely think it's a cultural thing. And all the measuring sticks out there, right? They're all linked to, well, what's the company's market cap? What are your professional accolades and achievements? How much, money or, value did you generate? And there's a lot of public recognition associated with that. And there's very little associated publicly and culturally, and far less celebrated around, well, just being a great spouse and parent, right? Leadership actually starts at home, right? You want to be a great leader, start by being a great spouse and parent. And health is funny. So health out of the three, it's a three-legged stool here of health, wealth, and relationships, right? We need to reach our fullest potential, perform at a peak level, become all that we can be in those three domains. Now, health often gets viewed last. Like, where do I fit it in? It's typically work. The pecking order is typically, for the overachiever, it's work, feeling guilty about the family. Let's get the family started. And then, oh gosh, where do I fit into health? It needs to be reversed, because as I catastrophically became aware, without health, we're nothing. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's the end of the chapter. Yeah.
Yeah. It's game over.
It's epilogue. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not selfish to be thinking about your health too, because somebody listening may think, yeah, but how do I have the time to prioritize me and my health? Well, what would be even more selfish is if you put yourself in a situation where you passed away and weren't even there to provide or do the looking after. Like, that would be more selfish. So I think it's a cultural thing. The imbalance, the over-indexing on work. But deep down inside, it's not what everyone wants. Everyone wants to be, as I said, fit and healthy, high performing within their work, and also a great spouse and parent, or, a partner, whatever you are, if you don't have kids or you're not married. We want to do our best on all three dimensions: health, wealth, and relationships.
And I mean, having that event in your mid-30s, that shows you must have been really, really, what you're saying, hardcore working.
Oh.
I mean, you must have been doing, I presume, no exercise, no healthy things at all. Maybe not eating well and all that kind of stuff. You just built all up to that condition.
Yeah, it was very hardcore. So, I remember times when I would work 2-3 days almost straight.
Wow. What, through the night as well?
Yeah. There would be times when, or with like minimal sleep, like 2-3 hours, and it might even be broken up. I remember days. I remember once leading a team meeting, and some of the leaders around the table, after the meeting, say, "You look a little bit tired." And I said, "What? Did you not sleep well?" And I said, "Well, I woke up at 12:50 today." And they're like, 12:50, and because I had gone to bed at 10, woke up at 12:50. Couldn't go back.
Started working. You started working 1 in the morning.
So there was a lot of that going on, and I had this invincibility, and there's the dinners, and then you go out for the drinks afterward, and then you don't get the proper rest, it just all adds up. And
just a quick question. I mean, in your the work you do now, where you obviously coach, I presume you're coaching male and female leaders.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you find a difference between those two? So I suppose one of the things, my observation when you were just talking was, maybe it's this, I don't know, Anglo-Saxon thing or whatever, but this kind of this Viking thing where, you can't show vulnerability, you've got to be behind the mask, you can't show that you're not like a Trojan, this kind of warrior kind of mentality which drives a lot of people, to be that kind of persona. I don't know if do you find it's that kind of dynamic between the male and female, or is it just is it in certain sectors, or is it across the board? I don't know. What have you found?
I think it's less dependent, in my experience. It's less dependent on male and female. It seems like it just more relates to the personality type, regardless of gender, that's attracted to the role of being a CEO or an entrepreneur or a rapidly rising leader. I find that male, female aside, the characteristics are quite the same.
Right.
That they're just super driven. Goal setting when it comes to work comes naturally. Over delivering when it comes to work comes naturally. Goal setting, personal accountability, and working as hard on the health department and then perhaps on the relationship things, doesn't come as naturally. It's kind of
okay.
But it's not as robust as it should be. And if these people, me included, I had to learn how to do this, were to apply the same rigor that they apply within their work and professional career to the health department, to the relationship department, what they don't realize, what I hadn't realized, is how much more fulfilling life becomes when we feel vibrant and alive. When we are working at our best, like more productively. I don't mean you have to work less per se. Well, yeah, you do work less, but it's more about how do you learn to work such that your output is the same or greater, but with less effort.
Yeah.
And
better effective use of time. Yeah.
Better effective use of time, more effective, bringing more intentionality into your day so that you're showing up, with that power pose, with that enthusiasm and confidence, right? That carries you through and kind of helps you influence those around you in a positive way as well. But also, one of my favorite quotes is from the American former boxer, Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And what I mean by that is that, a peak performing leader or entrepreneur or CEO is someone who's also built their anti-fragility. So someone who is able to turn stress into strength, right? Mentally, not just physically. So I think all these things, together represent exciting paths of development, and mastery potential. But again, going back to what I said earlier, I think are deeply desired by everyone. Once again, I think everyone wants to be as fit and healthy as they can, as high performing in their work or wealth creation as they can, and showing up as strongly, responsibly, and reliably as a parent or partner as they can.
I was just thinking while you were talking, though, is it also a symptom of our education system, in that that it's rewarded for if you think about all the skills that you learn, but they don't really teach you. I mean, I suppose you learn some about relationships in the playground, so to speak. But you then, when you come out of school, then you're in the big wide world, and the assumption is that you've then got to. Your parents want you to be successful, but the view of that being success is that you go through a pattern of getting a job and progressing through the organization. And then but then actually the relationships and the health dimension, you do a lot of stuff healthy when you're at school, But then unless you've got that discipline carries through into a sporting, maybe on a sporting heritage, then sometimes what I notice, and probably I've suffered from it as well, you have to jettison because of the time allocation, because of you want to be successful in your role. So you jettison the time on the health thing, that suffers. You then want to have a successful relationship. So you're kind of trying to balance that as well. So it becomes then a juggling act. And I think then back to the thing you were saying a bit earlier about how do you build in habits and how do you educate yourself early on in the cycle rather than finding out when you hit the wall, so to speak, or, your Mike Tyson example, when you get punched in the face.
Yeah. So 100% agree that it's an education issue. And I also think it's an intentionality issue. So starting with, education, yeah, you're absolutely right. Our society, especially, in the West, certainly I'm half Norwegian, half American. So it's definitely this way in the US, less so in Norway. You would have to tell me how it is in the UK because I didn't grow up here. But it's certainly in the US, it's all about, it's capitalism at its peak, right? So it's all about what are you achieving, how much wealth you created, your ambition level should go to the moon and back, and make the most of it. But it's very much with a professional orientation. Mm-hmm. And so there's loads of coursework and books and certifications and all of these things that you can do, which are championed to help you become your best in the work front.
Yes.
But where's all the coursework, books, education, certification, and the loads of things that you could be doing to teach you how to be a great, spouse and parent, right? Mm-hmm. Or, to teach you how to show up, your best for others. Similarly, on the health side of things, why is it that the only people who know about health to the degree we all should are personal trainers and nutritionists? Why isn't that working into our education? And then I think what ends up happening, so that's systemic. But then if we talk about things more locally, still within the education pillar here. So if we now go a little bit more locally and we think about the family unit.
Yeah.
And again, for all those listening, how are you running your family right now? What are you teaching your kids? What do you prioritize? Do you, is it ice cream every night? Is it, go to the gym occasionally? Is it talking about things you love and things that you're grateful for? Is it, do you have discussions about how do we treat each other a bit more empathetically? Or is it just more like all about work and, or with the kids, how was school today, which is their equivalent of work, right? So, a lot of the education, I think, locally within the family unit at home ends up just being around that one pillar as well, around work.
Yeah.
And education isn't just sitting down and reading a book, right? Education, to educate, right? We educate each other by just talking to each other about particular subjects. And to how much, to the parents listening, how much of your airtime goes towards health with your kids? How much of it goes towards relationships and what's important for building relationships? So what I mean with all of that is that I don't want, because when you said education, I think it's a great reason to explain why we're so focused on the one pillar. But it's really dangerous because it can also become a scapegoat and let, once again, today's listeners think that, it's the system. There's not much I can, that's why it is. No, you have a chance to break the chain right now. You can break the chain with yourself, with your family. You can break that chain. So that's the education part. And then I also just wanted to touch briefly on intentionality. And what I mean by intentionality is, just simply having it right, having an intention for how you want things to be. right? So to bring intentionality into those three pillars, this is the subject of my new book, The Three Alarms, which you mentioned that you read. So in that book, I share 3 simple phone alarms that I created years ago in these 3 domains, health, wealth, and relationships, whereby I chose a best self-identity for each domain. Mm-hmm. And then I gave that, a name. And then I set that up as an alarm on my phone to go off at the time of day, not where it was only that identity was relevant, but where that best self-identity, where that segment of the day would most benefit from being powered by that superhuman version of myself. Mm-hmm. And so at 6:30 a.m., the first alarm on my phone goes off and it says World Fitness Champion, because that's the intentionality I want to bring in to my day at 6:30 a.m. That's who's going to the gym in the morning. Mm-hmm. You can pick whatever identity works for you. If you're a swimmer, maybe you're Michael Phelps, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you're into tennis, maybe you're one of the Williams sisters, right? Whatever works for you. But that phrase works for me. And so that's who goes to the gym in the morning. Would a world fitness champion, when I'm cued at 6:30 a.m., does a world fitness champion go, don't really feel like the gym today?
Hit the snooze button.
Yeah, hit the snooze. Yeah, no, never, right? Because that's the difference between a professional and an amateur, by the way. So amateurs need feeling to precede action. Professionals know that action generates feeling. So the pro just goes, well, I don't need to feel like going to the gym. It's just something I do. And so I go to the gym. And then when I'm doing the exercises and I'm in the 8th repetition of a particular set and don't feel like I'm going to make it to the 10th, the little voice goes on, okay, well, World Fitness Champion, what do you do? Of course, 9th, 10th, and 11th and 12th for good measure. And 9 a.m., next alarm goes off. And what I mean by these phrases is that if you go to your phone and you can go, you'll see when you set up an alarm to wake up for the next day or whatever. You may not have noticed this before, but you'll see a field that says name or label, and you just click on that as you're setting up the alarm, and you can name the alarm to whatever you want, so that word or phrase will appear on the screen when the alarm goes off. So at 9 a.m., next alarm goes off for me, and it says world's best coach. I used to say world's best CEO when I was a CEO. These days, I'm just coaching entrepreneurs and CEOs, as mentioned. As world's best coach, and it's because, okay, well, how would that version of me start the day? How does that version of me show up? How decisive, inspiring, reliable will that version of me be? So it just changes. And I'm bringing that kind of intention. What's the intention with which I want this segment of my day to be powered? And then 6:30 p.m., the last alarm goes off. The real game changer for me personally, given my workaholic past, which is 6:30 p.m. It says world's best husband and father. To prompt the question, well, how would the world's best husband and father walk through that door right now? So yeah, that's education. Definitely is a huge source for being one-dimensional, as we tend to be. We have a duty, everyone listening, to educate our family unit correctly. And one of the ways to start doing that is by having discussions around, health and relationships and what it means to shine in both areas, but also to bring some intentionality into those 3 areas too.
I think it's absolutely inspired. I mean, when I saw the title of your book, and I know it's only come out in the last 30 days, yes, I'm honoured to have you on the show so recently after your book launch. I was intrigued. I wanted to find out what was the 3 alarms. Was it 3 alarms at the same time to say stop snoozing? You'd have to have stop snoozing 3 times.
Yeah.
Actually, and when you see about being staggered through the day, you basically worked out what your morning routine should be, what your day routine should be, and what your evening routine should be. And I think it's a really, really good guidebook, and very practical. for anybody. So, I can't recommend it highly enough, because it's really, really useful to watch. And I think what you've done is because you've made it personal, because you've actually related to real life stories. The story you started the episode today with, and I know there's quite a few other stories that you've got in the book as well. I just think it's a must read. You just have to read it. I read it and I was scarily thinking about my life as well, about the stuff that I've been through. And as I mentioned to you before, maybe you should have written it a couple of 20 years ago. I think it'd be helpful a lot of people. But I think, in the going future, if you think about the thing that's happened with the world recently, it's very timely. Because I think if you think about what's happened this year, is that it started to rethink what's more important. There's been so much turmoil, and what I think the statistic I saw in the Economist recently was that the number of businesses in the US has tripled or doubled this year, because people have been put on, they've been laid off, they've been furloughed or whatever, and they're going, okay, well, I'm going to become my own ship. I'm not going to rely on the corporate vessel anymore. I've got my superpowers, I've got my super skills, my talents, my gifts. I'm going to do something for myself, and I'm going to be in control of my own destiny, because that job for life is no longer there. It's not, you can't rely on that.
Yeah, it's been such a tough year for so many people, for the whole world, for all of us. And the principles and thank you for everything that you said, about the book. Very, very flattered to receive that. So thank you very much. But the principles in the 3 alarms in the book, they're not some discoveries that I made a handful of years ago, which applied then, and maybe you'll be at a time in your life where they may or may not apply. No, I use still to this day everything in that book. I'm still far from perfect. That book was not written as, I've reached enlightenment. Far from it. It's that I've set a bar of what best looks like for me, have found some principles that help close the gap between my current and best self, and on a daily basis are employing those techniques. And the case in point has been this last year. In the opening letter of the book, I share how, so one of the businesses that I built was Chilango, award-winning chain of Mexican restaurants here in the UK. Built it over a decade. Did that after we had our exit to eBay at Skype. We had an exit to eBay for about $4 billion, and was thinking, well, what should I do next? And I was sat on my sofa one day, and I thought, well, at the time, I thought, when did work not feel like work?
Right.
And I thought was when I was working in the restaurant industry. I thought. Of course, I was, in a totally different capacity. I was thinking back to my youth at the time. But I thought, well, maybe I could do that professionally. And then I was missing Mexican food, having grown up on it in Chicago.
Right.
And I saw nothing like that in London. And so I said to my business partner, in Chilango, Dan Houghton, who we worked together at Skype. I said to Dan, I was like, well, why don't we start a Mexican restaurant chain? And he took a couple of weeks to think about it. And then he said, okay, I'm in. And so we built this incredible, such an amazing journey filled with highs and lows, but built a truly award-winning brand that people absolutely loved, that we loved. The whole one-word distillation of the brand was vibrancy. Everything about Chilango is about vibrancy. But this last year was so tough. So, 2017, 18, UK restaurant industry, a lot of people listening wouldn't know much, say, in particular about the UK restaurant industry. But there was, in those years, there was a lot of big brands that were getting hit and going down left, right, and center. And we thought we weren't, we had this invincibility to us. Oh, we're going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so we continued to acquire leases,
Right.
develop sites in the regions. And because our sales kept going up, we seemed to be doing just about fine. And grew our invested further in the head office to work on various other sales initiatives and projects, and did this incredible fundraise, and then just within it was within 4 or 5 months of completing the fundraise, everything changed almost in an instant. We had prior to that point, we had ended up deciding to get out of 4 leases that we had acquired because of the market changing, and we said, okay, we actually can't develop those, and so we were trying to offload those leases. We thought the areas were too risky now to develop. Wanted to keep our attention in London, and all parties, they're all different. I remember Five Guys was one of the parties. KFC was another one.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone pulled out. The entities we were going to offload these leases to, they all
all right, okay, yeah.
all around the same time. For the same reason that we didn't want to develop the sites in the region as well. They, with their brand, said, you know what, the UK regionally, let's just stick to London. Rent-free periods end on those sites. Boom! Suddenly we have
costs go up like that. Yeah,
a massive cost, right? Close to £1 million drag on the P&L. HSBC pulls our overdraft facility, citing sector concerns as well. All the investments made in head office to drive sales are not providing the return on investment. Long story short, we have to do a very painful restructuring exercise of the whole company, of the whole chain. Restructure our debts because they're not going to pan out. With the current state of the business, we have to get rid of these leases somehow because we can't develop them. And our number one priority was preserve the principal investment and rates of return for our investors within the new structure, which we did. But it was super painful process, and the media just hammered us just relentlessly, and we just had to stay the course, get the restructure through. We did that, got it all through. Took a good 4 or 5 months of work. That was done in January of 2020. 2 months later, it was all for naught because 2 months later.
Thank you, Boris. Yeah.
Just 2 months later, it's lockdown, and boom, company was forced into a bankruptcy process within a matter of months because literally hospitality zero revenue. Yeah. So that's the backstory, to the last year with that company, and then on the coaching side, I coach about 20 CEOs, entrepreneurs, and I saw the same thing with them. So about 70% of their businesses, massive hits, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
what did you learn? I mean, thank you for sharing that story. It's obviously very. What did you learn from that? I mean, what I find in the UK and probably in some markets is that, if you're ultra successful, the media will, comment on it. If you view it as not being successful, the media will comment on it. So it's, your point about peak performance. It's like, let's just be average, yeah. But it's you've obviously been through a hell of a journey there. I mean, what did you learn from that? Is there anything you felt you could have done differently, or is that?
Yeah. Of course. I mean, there's anybody going through a process like that who would say that there's things that they wouldn't have done differently. That would be crazy. There's a bunch of things. Definitely would approach the regional expansion. Bit more slowly, right, in terms of acquiring those leases. Definitely would have looked to not have as much debt in the business as we had, right? would have absolutely preferred if we had more of the business, more of the structure on the equity side of the table rather than debt, without a doubt.
Right.
Definitely wouldn't, have invested as aggressively as we did in the head office, with the hope of generating, returns on all the various sales initiatives that we had people working against. So yeah, there's loads there that I would have done differently. Also, I would have not. It was a good lesson to keep your skin thick, right? Because it's so easy to throw stones. So, right? So you have to make sure that you're not a glass house, right? So, and certainly, I've come to learn in this, in the UK in particular, it's the media. They're just pretty much that they need very little. It appears they need very little other than a person making a claim to be able to cite something. Somebody said this, so that's good enough. So yeah, you have to develop a thick skin for all of that and just keep your head down. And the other thing, though, relating back to the book, The Three Alarms, is that it really allowed me to test and practice once again all of these principles around anti-fragility. So Nassim Taleb popularized the whole term anti-fragile in his book, and what anti-fragile is, it's so if you were, so Andrew, we're turning you into like a shipping crate. And so, I'm going to ask, so what's the label on the side of the crate, right? And not that you would say this, but let's say that, the label says fragile. So that means, you get kicked a couple of times and the box breaks, right? And then I say, well, what's the opposite of fragile? And most people wouldn't think anti-fragile. It's a term that's not very, common. And so you would think, robust or resilient. But all that means is that, you could take a bit more of a beating, but eventually, the box is still going to break. The opposite of fragile, if your label on that box said anti-fragile, then that would mean the more I kick you, the stronger you become. Now that's quite fascinating. And that has a superhuman-esque quality to it, right? And it can then also feel out of reach. Wow, sounds very alluring, sounds attractive, doesn't sound real. And that's where I stop people, especially with my clients. And I also do this Peak Performance Insights newsletter, on a weekly basis. So I talk about it there. And people think that, but anti-fragility, that doesn't apply to me. Dead wrong. Every single person listening, your body is the perfect temple of anti-fragility without you even realizing it. So you stress a muscle and it causes it to grow. You expose the body to germs, bacteria, it builds the immune system, right? Small doses of UV radiation actually generate vitamin D and repair, tissues. So your body is a temple of anti-fragility. Stress builds strength within your body. So we just have to get what's naturally occurring in your body and in the universe, by the way, the whole world, up here mentally into your head.
Yeah.
And it starts with reframing stress as not something that's bad for you, but something which, if viewed positively, can actually, improve and strengthen you. And that, remembering that all the stress that I was going through, that they were just nothing more than dumbbells, repetitions in the gym of life. And that if I just completed the rep, lifted it up, completed it, rather than walked out of the gym and said, I'm not going to train today. If I just stepped towards the rack, completed the repetition, that I would become stronger. So as crazy as it may sound to say, yeah, there's lots I would have done differently, but I'm grateful for the chance to have built what I did, and for all the learning that came out of it. That's what life is.
It's a bit like that phrase, isn't it? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
It is exactly like that. It's exactly like that. That's Nietzsche was really talking about anti-fragility, right? If we take three groups of people, so first group lives a relatively stress-free life. Group number two experiences moderate to high degrees of stress throughout their life, but views it positively. Group three, moderate to high degrees of stress, but views it negatively. Which group do you think lives the longest?
Exactly.
And yeah, it's not the first. It's not the people sipping a pina colada on a yacht somewhere. That they die before group number two. Group number two, moderate to high amounts of stress, but views it positively. They live the longest because stress builds strength, provided that, as I said, you reframe it. So once you do this, it's quite exciting because then your whole day, instead of going to the gym and it's just a physical thing and it only occurs in a particular location doing certain activities, your entire day becomes a gym, right? So every moment of challenge, adversity, thing that doesn't go your way, somebody saying bad things or untrue things about you, it's just a chance for you to alchemize that challenge into growth, to complete a repetition and emerge stronger as a result.
I think the point you were making when you were giving those examples of the body, with vitamin D, etc. I think that's what I was just thinking about. Was actually it is that it's back to the mindset. Yeah, it's back to how do you become robust and resilient and relentless in your mindset, but also get balance in your life as well. I think this is what I'm taking out of this conversation today, is that it's actually multifaceted, and I think the thing that I suppose it's there's all these, what you call it, I don't know what you call it. There's stuff that a number of people have written about with actually how to be. There's this thing about peak performance, about what is peak performance, how do you achieve that get. I think you call it gets to the summit. Yeah. And so it's a very. I think the topic can relate to people, but I think not everybody knows the path, and I think and knows the steps, and sometimes people are too. They're not confident or brave enough to ask for help, or they're not confident or brave enough to know who to ask.
Yeah.
And I think that's the great thing about the stuff you're putting out there now, because I think you obviously had to internalize it, and now you're externalizing it, and I feel like you want to let a lot more people know about this situation that can help them in their journey. It's kind of like it's like giving back, but it's like giving back from your experience, isn't it?
Yeah, on my path to becoming a peak performance coach for CEOs, for entrepreneurs, leaders, and one of the things I discovered was that behind the performance of any top performing individual, be they in business or sports or military or music and entertainment or arts, there's one commonality. There's a couple actually. There's a way in which they approach their skill development, but there's another commonality, which is the top performers all share a coach in the background. So, singers, Luciano, Pavarotti had a great voice, right? Phenomenal. Still took singing lessons. Still had, a singing coach, and Think of it this way. Imagine David Beckham at one point during his career turning to the sideline and saying, thanks, coach, but I think I got things from here. You can take the rest of the season off. That would never happen, right? And so if even the very best need a coach to both get to and stay at the top, what does that say about the rest of us? And what a lot of people don't realize, which is super prevalent in the United States, starting to catch on here, a lot of people don't realize is that all the aspiring, wanting to be the best or the best companies out there, they have executive coaching, supporting them. And my push is to make sure that executive coaching doesn't just spearhead and further the work at all costs kind of approach to life. But I approach the executive coaching from a peak performance angle, in that if we're trying to optimize our performance on the field, using a sporting analogy once again, on at work on the playing field, then we have to look at what's going on off the field as well. We need to optimize our health. We need to optimize our relationship. We need to become the very best we can become, not just on the work front, but also the health and the home fronts. And so it's having that holistic, I think, approach and so
the reason one of the things I've also heard about this kind of thing is about is your hope and desire that by teaching and coaching the leaders of these organizations, that they will then embrace it and actually cascade it and embed it into the way their business operates or their organization operates, whether it's not for profit or it's for commercial or whatever. Is that your hope and your dream and your desire and your goal?
100%, because it all trickles down. And if we just start, well, first of all, there's a scale issue. It can't do it for the masses and get the message out there as much as I would like to. But by working with the top leaders, if I can change their mindsets and get them to actually exemplify the things that they talk to and aspire to, but aren't actually doing or haven't managed to do themselves, then that can trickle down and benefit everyone else. Now, a lot of times people think that they just don't have time and capacity for it, and they just convince themselves. They convince themselves that they don't need 8 hours of sleep a day, for example. Which, by the way, there's a gene associated with not needing 8 hours of sleep, being able to thrive with less than 8 hours of sleep. Your chance of having that gene is equivalent to your chance of being struck by lightning. So you don't have the gene. So it's just hype BS that everyone gets bought into, and they become accustomed to operating at a lower baseline, basically, and they no longer have a reference point on what really.
But then it doesn't accrue over time. I suppose that's the thing about the 1980s, the Margaret Thatcher approach. She was proud to say, I only took 4 hours a day sleeping or whatever. And then, there's this kind of hero culture or heroism culture out the back of that. Oh, yeah, I've got to be like Margaret. That kind of thing. It perpetuates into something that's maybe not the right thing to do, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, a bunch of unhealthy BS from my point of view, because it's promoting the absolute wrong things. The evidence is clear. We need far more sleep than we as a society are getting. But what people, so the average entrepreneur, CEO, leader, they don't think they have time to fit in the health and the relationships, but it's because they're not working optimally. And it's because they don't realize that by prioritizing their health, that they'll actually be able to work with more focus and get more done, have higher energy levels, that they'll actually be more present and available when they get home because they won't feel so drained. And that because of that presence and availability at home and the strength of the relationships and the bonds that develop there, they don't end up benefiting from the security and the love and the foundation that creates for them, so that they can continue to do their best on the field, on the playing field, at work. Yeah. And so a lot of times in engagements with new clients, there's that initial period where I need to help them almost like redraw what their world is and get them to experiment and experience the benefits themselves, to see how there's a better side to things, and none of which requires that people have to do it on their own. Because again, if we go to our greatest favorite, sporting legend, none of them reached the top on their own, not a single one. They had outside accountability, guidance, and support.
Mm.
And this is now becoming more and more popular and recognized and sorely needed in the business world.
Mm. I mean, one of the scariest sessions I've ever seen a few years ago was by a guy called Tim Grover.
Yes, he was Michael Jordan's strength and conditioning coach.
And some of the stories he came out with for Michael Jordan, where they were on a basketball court once and they were training, and literally this guy in the opposition had a heart attack on the floor. Yeah. And Michael said, it's, come on, let's, we need to keep training. We need to keep, where's the ball? Let's get on with it. So that his mindset was just so, so focused on the outcome at any cost. I'm not, that for me, that sounded a bit extreme, but, I know that Sim is a bit of an interesting character. And sometimes empathy, maybe there's a bit more empathy in there, but he's quite an impressive kind of dialogue around some of the stories he shares and some of the
and I think you're right. We have to
moderate it.
Yeah, we have to be careful, who we idolize and who we seek to emulate. Elon Musk, for example, will sleep under his desk at times. In his own words, he hasn't had a vacation, I think, since for over 15 years, I believe. Yes, he's achieved a lot, but at what price? And when he shared this, some of the things I just mentioned in an interview, he almost broke down in tears as he was talking.
Because he was reflecting and realizing that balance wasn't there. Yeah.
Real time, he was reflecting about how little he was looking after his health and relationships. One of the I would hope no one listening has had a health scare as I did, but also I don't think you need one, because I'm sure there's times when you've looked in the mirror and you've thought that something needs to change, and that's all you need. And,
you just need a trigger. Yeah.
And the change doesn't need to, the change starts with intentionality. It starts with identity, right? Defining what does your best look like across your health, wealth, and relationships, giving that a name, cueing it in at the right time of the day. It starts with getting a lot more productive. How do you structure your mornings? How do you structure your workday routines? How do you structure your evening routines? How do you go about setting goals? How do you minimize distraction? Fight procrastination. There's techniques for all of this, and then it ends with, that's all well and good. Okay, I can define who I want to be identity wise. I can optimize myself for action, productivity wise, and then the unexpected happens, and that's the anti-fragility piece. And that's how you learn how to reframe stress and become better at navigating that. And on that point, one fantastic way so once you reframe stress and you reframe the unexpected as not being something that's bad for you, but actually something that can strengthen you. There's once you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to embrace this theoretically. Now, how do you put that into practice? And I've talked about outside support. You've talked about that as well, with the help of a coach. But people often forget their own internal wisdom and how it's a well of anti-fragility. And if you just practice this simple technique, no matter what the trigger is, the thing that's throwing you off, big or small, just focus on pausing. Insert a pause. If you master the art of the pause, you will be so surprised. And all I mean is that somebody says something you don't like, something happens that pisses you off, somebody cuts you off, whatever. We tend to, the stimulus, whatever that trigger is, and our response, they tend to be fused together. And usually that response whatever it may be, will be a suboptimal response. And by suboptimal, I mean something that the best version of you wouldn't do, something that one of those three identities that I referenced earlier wouldn't do, right? Not how the 95-year-old version of you would respond. And we feel bad about it, and it doesn't help us, and it weakens us, and we don't properly grow and develop. But if we just pause, deep breath, walking away, just going for a long walk if necessary, so we can create a tiny bit of space between stimulus and response, then we afford ourselves a chance to choose an optimal response. And that optimal response, whatever it will be, it will just emerge. You don't need to premeditate. All you need to do is just become very, very good at pausing. That's it. It's the one common answer to just pause. Because if you just pause and get into the habit of, okay, how would the best version of me respond to this right now? That answer will come. That wisdom is within. And as you do that, that's completing a repetition in the gym of life. And you start to build new response patterns, and you start to become anti-fragile.
It's very good. It's kind of like you're actually giving kind of like hacks and tips and tricks that people can apply into their daily lives. So it's very, very practical. It's good, really good. I mean, I know we talked a lot about the G, and I think the reason we spent about a lot of time on the G, the growth side, the personal journey, the business journey, because I think you've got such a vast experience in those areas. I mean, just touching on the T side, I mean, I was watching The Social Dilemma a few weeks ago. I don't know if you've seen that film.
Yes, I have, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know what your view on tech is. I know you've been involved in a tech company, or I know you probably, like me, you're kind of trying to work out what tech's about. And I've been working it for decades. I'm still trying to work it out.
Yeah.
And any view on tech, is that something that's kind of you see as a good thing in the future, as you see it as being kind of dangerous or kind of be managed, or what's your view on that?
I think it's absolutely a good thing, and it has the chance to, on a whole, just take human society to a completely different level and do lots of good. Naturally, at the pace in which it's developing, there'll be a lot of bad things that result as well and come into the fold, but there's good and bad with everything. So,
yeah.
I think with tech in particular, especially with regards to the social dilemma, one of the things that I do and encourage all those I'm working with to do is just turn off all the notifications. I haven't had an email notification on my phone for years. I don't have any social notifications. There's nothing, absolutely nothing. And when I open up my inbox, that's when I check my email. And when we're constantly on and constantly being bombarded with all of these inputs, it makes it very, very difficult to work productively.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I teach people is how to reclaim 13 weeks a year, every single year. And you do this by mastering the art of single tasking. So the average person loses about 28% of their workday to jumping around from one task to the other.
So it's context switching issue.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that will be driven by tech. So, an email notification, a social notification, the phone rings. And if you can get into the habit of working for blocks of time on something in a more singular way, take your phone, put it in a drawer, shut it off, put it in the other room, and not allow yourself to be bombarded. 28% loss of the day. If we take 6 weeks off for vacation a year, so we're down to 46 weeks. And if we do 28% of a loss of a day times 46 weeks, that means we're losing 13 weeks a year.
Wow.
To distraction or jumping around from one task to the next. That means that, of course, the average person feels like there's not enough time in their day because they're only playing with 3 quarters in their year instead of 4. They're missing a whole quarter. A whole quarter is gone. And if we extrapolate that over a 40-year career, that's an entire decade. And what could you do with an extra decade? That's like a whole other career. That's like 2 careers. Right?
Yeah, that's a scary stat.
Right? So, tech is great, but it's also contributing to, a massive loss in our time. So we think we're being super effective because of how effective the tech is making us. But remember, that tech is making you super effective in the 3 quarters of the year that you're present, but you've also lost an entire quarter. So I don't know, what's the net gain there? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's when you put those kind of stats behind it. It's then everybody be deleting all their social apps, which I know some people start to do anyway. So I'm not saying that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, or at least, once again, turning those notifications.
Detox.
Yeah.
So in terms, I mean, to try and pull together today's episode, I mean, I wanted to, I suppose, the last few things I was going to ask you about was firstly about if you were going to summarize, some kind of pearls of wisdom takeaways from what you've learned since these big events that happened to you in the last couple of decades. What would you like to share with the audience? What would be the kind of the big rocks, the big things that you'd like to get people to think about?
I believe that everyone can become extraordinary. Everyone can reach their full potential without the unhealthy hustle, and that it's never too late to start. And the path that I took and recommend that people try in my book, The 3 Alarms, is to focus on IPA. So like the beer, but better for you. So focus on identity. Who is it that you want to be in those 3 domains? Productivity, right? Really optimize yourself for action. And then anti-fragility. Become a master at turning stress into strength and navigating the unexpected. And if you really apply yourself diligently to that, I really think you can 100% close, the gap between your current and best self and reach your potential, not just with yourself, but with your leadership, with your company, with your family, with your health, with your relationships, really, really multidimensionally. And I solemnly believe that is the path to deepest fulfillment.
And I suppose it links back to something that you do mention in the book about the 2% and the Maslow hierarchy and everything like that, about the self-fulfillment.
Yeah.
Self-actualization.
Yeah, Abraham Maslow, with his hierarchy of needs, he said that we seek to fulfill basic needs first, such as our, food, environment, safety, shelter, love, belonging, finances. But once those more basic needs are met, and as we go up what he called his pyramid of needs, we reach the top of self-actualization, reaching our full potential. That's what I mean by peak performance. I simply mean reaching your full potential in the areas of life that matter most. Now, in his estimate, he estimated that only 2% of people realize their full potential. I want to be in the 2% club. I don't want to be in the 98%. Now, part of being in the 2% club, though, is realizing that you never arrive and that it's the path, that is the journey. And you're just getting a little bit, but you're much happier with who you are, but at the same time, striving to become a little bit better each day. So, yeah.
It just reminds me about, I suppose, if you think about, we're now in 2020, it's what could be 2030. So I suppose, how do we get the stuff that you've researched, experienced into more people, so that more people can become what they potentially have got, as a characteristic that people don't realize what they can achieve, and it's kind of inspirational to get to that place. So let's see. So, how many million people could we get to play the three alarms by 2030? I suppose that's the BHAG. That's the BHAG, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. If we can get 10 million, 100 million, kind of defining what best looks like and really trying to show up better, multidimensionally, and experiencing much greater success and fulfillment also in their work as a result. I know that is a huge motivator for people. But without sacrificing and actually improving their health and relationships, I think that would be magic.
Well, I celebrate the work you've done so far. I celebrate the movement towards that BHAG.
Yeah, so, thank you, Andrew.
We'll have to check in before 2030, obviously, but I'm sure I'll look forward to watching the progress.
Yeah,
so in terms of actually getting to know more about your work and getting to know and understand and get access to the work together.
Yeah.
What's the best way of finding more out for people that listen to this episode?
Yeah, so I definitely wanted to offer something exciting up for all of your listeners. So for the next 2 weeks from today, if you just head over so you can get a free digital copy of my new book, 3 Alarms, and a free 3-part video training plus worksheets that helps you further embed some of the principles that we discussed today and that are also referenced in the book. If you just head over to my website, you can pick that up. It's Eric, ERIC, Partaker, PARTAKER, ericpartaker.com. And you can pick up the digital copy and the free video training. And if you're a CEO, also if you're a CEO, entrepreneur, or leader, and would love to have a kind of a no strings attached peak performance insight session for yourself, then also via the website, feel free to get in touch and we'll set something up.
Fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. It's extremely, you've shared so much value in the time we spent together. And I know there's lots more value with the stuff you just mentioned there. So all I can say is thank you for coming on the episode today. And for all those people actually that are watching on YouTube, you probably wonder where I am actually. I've now flown over in the G&T session-sponsored helicopter to Chicago in honor of where Eric was born, you see. So that's just to clear that little backdrop up for the benefit. I know that Eric's not in Chicago today, but so I just thought it was a very nice backdrop. Yeah. So thank you again for coming on the show, Eric. And it's been a great time with you. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you so much. And thanks also to everyone who's listening. I know, I certainly know how valuable time is, and I know how valuable your time is. And so, just grateful for, if you've listened to the end here, very grateful for that. So thank you.
No problem. Have a great day. Take care.